Start. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Amber Peterson. I am with Permy and Peterson Associates, and I am hosting our weekly pop-up health conversation. So really to get at how are we all doing physically, mentally, emotionally during this time. It's all the words that we've heard, right? Challenging, unprecedented, tough, hard, rough, lots of words to describe where we're at right now. And I'll a little preview into this is that words do give us power over naming how we're feeling and how we're doing in whatever situation that we're in. And I want to send out a kudos to someone that had come in on our Thursday talks. Our Thursday talks with Kathy are about the gig economy, most talking about for independent consultants, small business owners, people that are in smaller business settings, we'll put it that way, who might be struggling during this time, are probably struggling during this time. And someone had joined our conversation there who had brought up an article from the Harvard Business Review about grief, and that many of us are going through the grieving process right now. And I would say the majority of us probably are. Some of us maybe don't even know it. So I want to send out that thank you to Cody. Thank you for the inspiration for today, because that is the topic of our discussion, is grief and how we're grieving. So as a part of this, because of we're doing the recording, I'm not gonna do introductions right now. But what I am gonna do is jump right in to talk about the grieving process. And just gonna pause for a sec because I see someone else came online. Give them a moment. Beth, welcome. Just to let you know, Beth, I'm recording this right now. We're gonna have some discussion in a little bit, but I'm gonna talk about grief and the situation we're in right now. So feel free to put anything in the chat while we're going, and we'll have a little discussion really soon. So, but for now, for everybody listening to the recording, let's talk about grief. It happens more than we think, and a lot of times we think about it in the sense of death, right? We think about it as in caused by death, and really, when we look at grief or defining grief, it can occur in so many places in our lives. I'm going to send out another kudos here to Professor Jim Olhoff from St. Mary's University of Minnesota, and his discussions on lost identity or lost meaning in the grieving process and how those work together. And then if you jump to the last one, certainty. If we are living in a time of uncertainty, which we really are right now, there can be a lot of grieving there, because when we let go, or when we don't have certain things right in front of us, then we can jump into the grieving process, we'll put it that way. Grieving for the loss of one's worldview. That's Dr. Dennis Conroy. He's a former police officer here in the metro area turned psychologist in retirement, and has written a book and articles on this particular, that when we lose our worldview, when we are going through life, we're pretty certain, we feel like, okay, I know what's going on. When we get thrust into a new worldview, or our worldview is challenged, that can also bring on the grieving process, because we are again thrown into uncertainty. Now we have to stop and wonder, where am I and what's happening? I'm confused. I'm not sure what's happening. I might be in denial. I really need some time to sit and think about this. The other two that I have on here are hopes for the future and a person or group. So grieving for a person or a group, it might even be in this case, in COVID, right? We're grieving for the loss of our time together. Or even if you had say you had a social group, whether it was that you got together for a beer on Thursday nights, or a workout group, or even your fellow peer group at your business or your work, you could be grieving just even not having that normal process with them. So lots of different places where this happens. And now we've all heard about the stages of grief, right? The denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We've heard about that whole cycle. And since this came out many years ago now from Dr. Kubler-Ross, we know that not ever that we don't go in this linear path of denial, then I hit anger, then I hit bargaining, depression, and finally I hit acceptance. We're going to bounce and zing back and forth, maybe feeling numerous things all at the same time, and could go through many different stages all in 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, and just keep cycling through, and it takes time. So I'm here you can see on the screen that I reference Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant in their book Option B, where it talks about Cheryl's journey through grief and the grieving process after her husband died, and then different research that she jumped into, and her great friend and fellow researcher Adam Grant jumping in as well. I loved the book. It was a great resource for me. And one thing that they say in there is that we don't progress in a linear fashion. We rise and fall, and that I love this line: grief and anger aren't extinguished like flames doused with water. And that it's not simple, is what they're saying, is the grieving process is not simple. So grief and COVID-19. So here's where I'm going to reference the article that Cody brought up to us. Thank you again, Cody. From Harvard Business Review. The article was that discomfort you're feeling is grief, is the title, if you want to look that up. By the way, Harvard Business Review, really cool thing right now is any articles that they write that are connected to COVID-19 are free. Usually you have to pay for articles on their website, or you get like 2 freebies a day or a week or something like that. Now they're opening their whole archive for anything that's COVID-19 related. So that could be remote work, that could be health related. It's really cool. So take advantage of that, guys. But here's where I want to dive into their article. They talked about a couple different kinds of grief, and they reached out to a fellow researcher of Dr. Kubler-Ross, who also helped her write that text. That's Dr. Kessler, and he talked. So they actually reached out to him, interviewed him, probably over the phone virtually, I'm going to guess. And he talked about collective grief and anticipatory grief. Now, collective grief is when we have something that we're experiencing together. Think any of the wars we've been through, or 9/11. That was a big time of collective grief, right? As a nation, we were grieving maybe the loss of our freedom or what that new environment meant. And right now we're in the same space. And it's sad at the same time. Here's kind of the cool thing: we're doing this globally. We are all in this together, guys, all of us. And here's the important part with that, is that remembering that someday this will end. Now, we are going to be into a new normal. That's the case, and that's how it's going to go. We're not going to go back to the way it always was, where we'll have a new normal, but we won't. We have to remember that this is a temporary time where we're all physically distancing from each other, let's say, and that we are having to be on lockdown, that our businesses are closed, things like that. Someday it will resolve. And the reason that that's important is when we talk about when we talk about our mindset, and if something is temporary or permanent. Now, those are two ends of the spectrum, and there's a lot of feelings in between, right? And we have to remember that if we think about something as completely permanent, it is much harder to overcome than if we think that it's temporary. And that's a mindset thing. Now, I know that something permanent like death, that's something different, right? But in this situation where we're talking about the place that we've been put in, remember that it's temporary. That will help us all move forward closer to that acceptance, right? Preview for a little bit later on here in the presentation. But getting back to this, anticipatory grief. Now, what is that? Anticipatory grief is, say, easy example would be when someone in your family has cancer, and you know that it's terminal, and you know they're going to pass sometime soon. That's something you can anticipate in the grieving. So in that case, you might start your grieving ahead of time, right? Now, Dr. Kessler in Harvard Business Review's article talks about anticipatory grief, in that we are kind of thrust into that right now, where we're in the sense that we know this is happening. We know, and we see that we're going to be locked down for a little while longer, and that things are going to change. We're going to be in a new normal. So that's what we're anticipating. it's that uncertainty that we're anticipating, that we're going to live in that for a while yet. So the important things to think about when we're thinking anticipatory grief is, what is the story that we're telling ourselves right now? That kind of links back to that temporary versus permanent. Am I telling myself that this will go on forever? Am I telling myself that that this uncertainty is so terrible that it's completely disrupted my life? That might be true, but how much am I telling myself that? Negative thoughts will cycle very, very frequently, quickly, frequently, and for a long time in our minds. So we have to interrupt that cycle by throwing something positive in there, like, okay, I'm going to acknowledge that I'm living in a time of uncertainty. And I might be really frustrated by that I don't know when things are going to resume, and what's under my control right now today. So, and I loved this that Dr. Kessler brought up in the article, is instead of thinking about the worst thing that could happen, because we tend to do that. That's how we operate as humans, and that's okay to do, right? Now, but if you're cycling through that and that's getting you more and more anxious, because anticipatory grief is really anxiety. It's really anxiety about the future. Now, how do we interrupt that? Instead of our mind cycling through the worst thing that can happen, we stop and say, what's the best thing that can happen right now? Instead of my thinking about how my loved ones might die and different things happening and the world crashing and burning, I might think instead, the best thing that could happen is, they're going to find a cure, or they're going to find some treatment right now. And because a lot of companies are working, I think I saw 140 different groups are working on different options right now to treat this. Interesting. But the best thing that could happen is now our cases are going to level off, and we're going to get to be in our physical presence again, right? Just something that we can practice. Okay. So I love this. I stole this from Human Synergistics. Looks like, sounds like. I love this exercise because it can get us starting to think about, what does this actually look like, sound like? What does this actually mean? So when we talk about grief, what could it look like, sound like? Now these are, I would say, the physical representations of what we're going through in our minds is the look like, sound like. Crying, worry, anxiety, those are things that we anticipate we might see, right? Something that surprised me was headaches and aches and pains. Now, that surprised me because that's not typically what I think about when I think about grief. But then I stopped and thought, okay, stress. What is grieving? It's stress. Stress in our minds and our hearts. And that could physically come out as aches and pains, including difficulty sleeping and fatigue, hand in hand. Feelings of detachment. I'm not sure where I'm at right now. What's even happening? Isolation from friends and family. Well, besides the social isolation, right? That's just how it's going. But isolation in the sense that we are, besides being socially responsible, we're actually isolating ourselves. Frustration, guilt, anger. This again was a surprising one for me, thinking about coming back to that, the cycles of grief. I was at first surprised, thinking like, well, grieving is sadness. Well, really, grieving can be frustration. Grieving can be, I feel really guilty that I'm not doing more. Grieving can be anger. Again, back to the cycle. Questioning purpose of life and spiritual beliefs. Definitely. We could all be questioning right now, I don't get why we're experiencing this. So here's the sound like, right? It feels like it's never going to end. And I feel like I'm getting sick. That's that paranoia piece, right? Am I getting sick? Oh my goodness, I don't know. I feel angry. I don't know why. I'm frustrated because I can't go out with my friends. I'm frustrated because I can't go to work like normal, or I can't do something else, right? I'll back to that thinking of, I'll never see my loved one again. I'll never get to play football again. I'll never get to, it's that look like, sound like from the grieving side. Why are we experiencing this? Or I don't even feel like getting off the couch today. And it's okay to feel this, right? It's okay. How can we stop and recognize where we're at? How can we honor where we're at in this whole thing? So I brought up option B from Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. I loved this line as well from them, that grief is a demanding companion. I just want to stop and acknowledge that for all of us, that it's okay to not want to get off the couch and to take a long time to do a task that you would have normally taken a very short time to do before, because we're all struggling in different spaces right now in different ways. And I thought this was interesting as well, is that the typical person takes 2 to 6 months to recover from a significant loss. And my question, my wondering when I saw that was, well, right now, how do we recover as things are continually changing and that we are still living in the uncertainty? Now, I think about this on one end from if I lost a family member, 2 to 6 months, that's an average time to recover from that significant loss. Um, and that might just maybe as a part of the whole COVID-19 journey, that might be one slice of my journey is maybe I lose a family member from this. Um, and that the recovery from that might look very different than the recovery from the whole. Probably will. It's food for thought, something to think about. Also, what else can we do? Here's the list. This I took from a lot from the HBR article, as well as some other resources that I had, which I'm going to share with you soon. So educating yourself. Dr. Kessler suggested this, that first we stop and we say, educate yourself on the grieving process. What does it look like? Remembering those terms and remembering where we could all be at. Education, that knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power. And I invite you to then be curious and ask yourself, and if you're feeling something, if you're feeling an emotion, or maybe you're not feeling anything and you're wondering, that's strange, stop and recognize that. And then say, what am I experiencing right now? Put a name on it. That's important. That as much as the knowledge is power, so is the naming of things. Naming that for ourselves and saying, I am grieving right now. And I am, in this moment, I might be feeling frustration, anger, or sadness, or I don't feel well. Okay. Uh, and also to ask it when you're observing that with other people, what might they be experiencing, or asking them and noticing, acknowledging with them, I noticed that you seem a little off today. Are you okay? Even asking, how are you doing today? Today is the key word with that. Hi, Cody. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late.
That is okay. We're almost done with the presentation part, and then we'll jump on into some
Keep going.
discussion.
Don't mind me. I'm just glad to see other adults.
I understand. Uh, so, so again, being curious with yourself, being curious with others, and recognizing. I loved that in one article I read, they were talking about recognizing my coworker was doing something differently than normal. I think that was the HBR article again, and just giving people grace that they're going through things right now, and we're all experiencing different, even just different atmospheres, being at home and having children to take care of, and that type situation. And I loved this line that they used in the HBR article: emotions need motion. So for that, what I got from that was, first you need to name it, that part of the motion, recognizing and naming it. And then also from my end, I would add in there that emotions need motion in the sense of actually physically moving. Physical motion, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's dancing it out with some music, whether it's, whatever you do for physical activity is really going to help. There are so many articles out there, an unnamed number of articles that talk about physical exercise linked with depression studies and how they have used physical activity to fight depression and help. I actually had a client when I was working in the fitness industry. I had a client who I got to see her when she walked in her first day at the gym. And she tells people about her story here that she had many meds she was on because she had a lot going on mental health wise. And after a few months of consistently coming to the gym and working out, actually 7 days a week, she's a machine, man. She got off a lot of her meds. It's just it's that physical activity is so powerful. I want to also bring up another study I read about a long time ago, where it talked about the two studies actually. First was for kids to help fight screen time. They recommended getting out in nature. That actually what the study found was that any effects that screen time had on these younger kids, the getting out in nature was actually helping fight those effects that they saw. So I would argue that that's the same for us. And we have a lot more screen time right now than normal. So making sure we get out in nature is so important. And also talking about nature, another study I'd read about a long time ago was also fighting depression using nature. So just even going and sitting out in a park, let's say, sitting on a bench, washing your hands, maybe keeping your hands in your pockets right now, right? But staying but being out in the green and in the fresh air and being able to see, hear different things than in our homes helped people fight their depression. So food for thought. Okay. And then I talked about compassion for yourself. Self-compassion is so important as part of this curiosity, as well as having compassion and grace for others. Third thing on here is make meaning. So making meaning of our situations I'm going to use the word powerful again, can be another powerful tool in helping us find maybe acceptance right now in this moment. It's first letting go of what we can't control, acknowledging that. I can't control that my neighbors might step outside. I can't control that if I go to the grocery store, someone might be standing close to me. What I can control right now for me is I'm making sure I'm not touching my face. I'm washing my hands frequently. I'm very conscious of others, and I'm making sure I'm getting adult interaction. Yes. And for my own mental health, but letting go of what we can't control. Harder than it sounds, right? Easier said than done, and still able to do it. Now, finding acceptance where we can is, okay, in this moment, I can accept that I have to stay home. I can accept that I'm doing that for with the best intentions for my family, my friends, and society. Okay, I can accept that right now. You don't have to accept it for weeks and months, right? It's day to day. Last two things, practicing gratitude. We find what we seek. So if you're intentionally looking for things to be grateful for, you're going to see more to be grateful for. That's what I'm saying. Last thing is practicing mindfulness. I liked that they brought this up in the HBR article, and other places I've seen this, as well as helping the grieving process, fighting trauma, all sorts of things. Mindfulness is a great tool. And two things that I want to bring up. First is tactical breathing. So what is that? That is breathing in on a count of 4, holding it for a count of 4. It's the square. In out for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. So it's as simple as just holding, out, holding, and noticing how your body responds. And do that for a minute. With that, what you could also do, and you can do this in your own space, right? You don't have to do this in front of people if you feel uncomfortable, but put a hand on your stomach and try to breathe the air into your stomach instead of your chest. What that does is we have what's called the vagus nerve. It sits behind our diaphragm, between our spine and our diaphragm. And by breathing into our stomach, we inflate our diaphragm really widely, which helps massage that vagus nerve, which actually tells your body to relax. It's a nice little switch to tell it, hey, body, relax, no matter what's going on. So breathing in through our stomach and then out through our mouth is a great, that sounds kind of weird. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. That's what I meant to say, but inflating your stomach instead of your chest. Yes. Last thing is being present and noticing 5 things. So this is an easy, if you're feeling some anxiety, you're feeling some stress, this is an easy way to bring yourself back to the present, is to stop and say, what are 5 things that I notice right now in my present moment? So I can say, in my office, I see my small whiteboard with some orange writing on it. That's very specific. I see my nice new little cactus that my cat chewed on. Second specific thing. I see my red folder, my phone, and I see my blue water bottle. Okay, now I'm rooted in the present. So things that we can help with the grieving process to help bring us back in and talk about the present. So that is it for the presentation part here. I want to thank you for spending some time with me this morning. And if you're reviewing the recording of this, thank you very much for tuning in. Contact me at my email. I'd love to hear how you're doing. Visit our website if you'd like. And right now, through May 16th, we're offering free executive coaching. And I would say it's more than a free hour. I want to update that to say as needed. Free executive coaching as needed, one-on-one, confidential, non-judgmental, as needed through May 16th. So some of the resources I used today, Option B by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant, to mention that. Grief.com is Dr. Kessler's website, and it's has a lot of great resources on it. fabulous. The HBR article, again, HBR is offering free articles, anything related to COVID-19, jump on there. And then I was actually on psychcom.net looking at depression and different signs out of that curiosity. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you again. We'll see you next week.